So in Islam, I think it's a very controversial topic, and I think that the general understanding that most Muslims have is that it is impossible that God had a messenger or a prophet that's a female. No, this is unheard of. It's blasphemy. It's heretical. It's crazy. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام المهدينا وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's good to have you back, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So today, what are we talking about?
Today we have a question to answer, actually. On a previous episode that we recorded, this commenter left a question. Can these messengers ever appear as women too?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And in order to answer that question, I think first we have to examine in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, what are the different titles that are given to people that have communications with or are representatives of God.
Okay.
Okay, so if we go to the Old Testament in Judaism, we'll find that there is something called a prophet.
Yes.
And an example of a prophet would be somebody like Moses. So it's somebody who's receiving communications from God, revelations, hearing the voice of God, or speaking to angels.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then we have something called a priest. And a priest is also a messenger from God. It's somebody who's a representative of God. And he performs particular functions, that have to do with purification or certain functions that have to do with the temple.
Yes.
And an example of a priest in the Old Testament would be somebody like Aaron, who was the vicegerent of Moses and his brother.
Yes.
Okay. We have also the title of a judge. And a judge in the Old Testament would be somebody who would lead the Israelites and judge them in all of their affairs. So they'd lead them into battles, into openings. And an example of that in the Old Testament is somebody like Joshua.
Yeah.
And what is the final example?
A king.
A king.
Yeah, like David, Solomon. Yeah.
Exactly. So that is the final example of a representative of God. They have the title of a king. But we find that the title messenger itself, or Rasul, is missing. It's absent from Judaism because they're all kind of seen as messengers of God.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And in Christianity, the New Testament, basically it's the same as Judaism in terms of the titles, except we add on there, the title of apostle. Okay, and an apostle is somebody who is a messenger, but not a messenger directly from God, but a messenger from Jesus.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's used to describe the 12 disciples.
Yes, the people who Jesus sent forth.
Exactly. And you have Messiah. And the Messiah, he's a king, but he's a special king.
Yeah.
He's the promised one. He's the savior.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have in Islam, we have a Rasul. And a Rasul is a messenger. And we have a prophet, a Nabi. And we have an Imam. These are the three titles that are given to people who are appointed by or representatives of God. And in Islam, there are 124,000 prophets that were sent to mankind, and there's 313 messengers. And every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger.
Okay.
And so the way that it's divided over there is not really so much about their function, because in Islam, for example, you have David and Solomon, and David and Solomon, although in Judaism they fall within the category of kings, but they're still representatives of God.
Yes.
In Islam, they are kings, but they are prophets, but they are messengers.
Okay.
And so, like I said, there's 124,000 prophets, but these prophets in Islam, they were people who reached a particular rank, and they managed to communicate or receive communications from God.
Okay.
But they were not given the task to go forward to the people of the earth with any particular message.
Okay.
So it wasn't their job, for example, to warn mankind that anything's going to happen, or to demand reformations in society, or anything of the sort, unless they were a messenger. Okay. And there's only 313 of them.
Okay.
So 124,000, they received messages, and at times they would speak about the messages or speak about the dreams which they had, or the communications with God, but they weren't given the task to do so.
Okay. That makes sense. There are certain people who had communication with God who had a more specific role, like they had to do something, they had to do a mission that God gave them.
Yeah.
But other people, it doesn't mean that they were the only people that God communicated with. There were other people who had prophecy. That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like this ladder that human beings can climb up. Yeah. You have the general public, and then you have a layer above that are believers out of that general public. So the people from the general public, or the general human beings on the planet that chose to believe in the words of the prophet and the messenger. So that's a degree above the non-believers. The believers, they hear God's words and they accept it, even though they're not hearing it directly to them. So it's through somebody else, but they accept it. So that's a rank higher. And then out of this group of believers, okay, all those who believe really firmly and with a lot of certitude in the words of the prophets or the messengers, it's a very real reality for them, and they don't doubt in it at all. From those believers, 124,000 were chosen and were good enough to pass on to the next level of faith, whereby God would give them themselves direct messages and signs and communications from him.
Okay. Yeah.
And then out of those 124,000 prophets, it's one thing to receive a message and to believe in it in the comfort of your own home, but it's a whole nother story to have to declare it publicly in front of the people, or to go forward and have that much faith in your dream that you demand on its basis, or you condemn a king or a tyrant on its basis. Yeah. And so there were only 313 of those prophets that had enough certitude and enough courage and enough determination to take their faith to the next level. And for that reason, God chose them and gave them the task to go forward and rule over mankind, or deliver particular messages.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, 313 is a really tiny number compared to how many human beings have lived throughout history. So yeah, it requires a huge amount of faith. And we even have, in the stories of the prophets and the messengers, how it was difficult for them to undertake this huge task in the beginning. They had to have a lot of faith to do it. So, yeah.
And then those 313 messengers that were sent to humanity, only to reach the next level, you have to have enough faith in your message that even if God had given you a message which was contradictory to the messages that you had heard about from previous prophets and messengers, that you would still be able to abandon what the previous prophets and messengers said and what the people were used to, and go forward to them with a brand new message and a brand new jurisprudence or law. And we find that although there was 313 that were determined enough to go face the people with their messages, only about 5 of them had the courage and the ability to go forward to their people with a new message which contradicted or was different than the messages that the people were used to. Because a prophet, it's hard enough to go to the people and tell them that you're a prophet, or to give them prophecies, but to give them now a new law that's different than what they're used to, that's going to cause a backlash, a lot of people to perhaps fight against you.
Yes, I mean,